Marina Alexis. She should be a writer.
From day one of my favorite elements of Pretty Little Liars was the tight-knit friendship between the four core girls. Since the first season of the show, there were countless funny and heartwarming moments that showcased just how close the group of liars had become. But what I particularly appreciated about this set of friendships was how the writers cultivated a different and distinct dynamic between each pair. Today I'll be analyzing the friendships between each of the liars, and ranking them from what I consider to be the weakest to the strongest, Aria and Emily. I'll start with the dynamic that, in my opinion, is the weakest friendship between the girls, Aria and Emily. It's ironic that these two are the first to reunite and become friends again at the start of the show. They confide in each other right from the start, and seem far less hesitant to allow each other to get close after the A-texts begin than Hannah or Spencer, despite the fact that Emily and Aria were the first of the friends to reconnect. As the show went on, they seemed to have the weakest overall bond, and I think a lot of this comes from the lack of meaningful scenes that they shared. Most of the other friendships contained significant moments that really illustrated the closeness between the two girls, whether through giving advice or comfort, or sharing a secret or special moment together. While I can think back on a few nice scenes between Aria and Emily, notably talking about prom in Aria's room, and Emily consoling Aria after Shauna's death, but they lacked the defining moments that many of the other friendships shared, and their deeper scenes took place primarily in the later seasons, which couldn't quite make up for the lack of an individual bond that existed between them early on. I'm not quite sure why it seemed like Emily and Aria lacked the deeper friendship that most of the other girls shared. One reason may come down to the fact that out of the foursome, Spencer and Hannah were typically the most determined ones, who tended to lead the investigations, discussions about A, and so on. As Emily and Aria were generally the more reserved and hesitant out of the group, it makes sense that they would be paired together less often, especially during storylines that were directly related to the mystery. Emily and Spencer. I feel like this one's going to be an unpopular opinion, but here we go. I've always felt like fans are very divided in their opinions on these two. Some think they had one of the strongest bonds on the show, and others feel like they weren't particularly close at all. I fall somewhere in between both camps, but overall I'd say I lean more toward the second option. While it's obvious that Spencer and Emily cared deeply for each other, I've always thought that they had a lot more tension between them than any other combination of liars. This may come down to their similar personality traits. They're both protective, headstrong, and have the tendency to be judgmental at times. It's natural that these qualities would lead to a lot of instances of butting heads, which I think was made very clear in a lot of their interactions and arguments. Something else that I've noticed about this dynamic while rewatching is that, especially in the later seasons, Emily and Spencer seem to have less compassion for each other during their darker moments than they had for Hannah or Aria. When Spencer was heartbroken over Caleb's betrayal, there was a definite coldness that permeated Emily's reaction to her spilling her guts. And later in the season, when Emily was struggling with the knowledge that her eggs had been used to impregnate Allison, there was a similar chill to the way that Spencer responded. That said, I do think that there is a positive element to this. I believe that a lot of this perceived coldness on both sides comes from Spencer and Emily holding each other to higher expectations than Aria or Hannah, who they seem to view as more emotional or even fragile. I feel like they saw each other as stronger, more capable, so weren't sure how to react when each other broke down. This is reflected in Spencer's unofficial status as the leader of the group, and how Emily naturally rises to fill that role when Spencer is incapacitated in Season 3.
Toby has turned our boss into a romantic. I was always a romantic.
So overall, while I don't feel like these two were particularly close or had the same warmth between them that many of the other friendship dynamics did, there's no doubt that they held a respect for each other that was unrivaled. Aria and Hannah. This is an interesting friendship to me because of how much it shifted as the show went on. Aria and Hannah seemed to have the strongest relationship by far in the early seasons. They were the first to refer to each other individually as best friends, and they were paired together for a lot of Season 1's storylines.
Deal with the universe throwing me curveballs, but if they're gonna start coming from my best friend, then I have a problem.
There was a chemistry and relatability to their scenes that really made them feel like two close friends, regardless of A and all of the show's other weirdness. But I had to rank this pairing so low because as PLL went on, it felt like Aria and Hannah lost a lot of the closeness that had once existed between them. As other friendships developed, between characters like Emily and Hannah or Aria and Spencer, it seemed like the bond between these two got pushed relatively to the wayside. They had the occasional fun storyline together, like Hannah helping Aria set up a dating profile for her mom, but there was a definite shift in their relationship around the time of Season 3 or so. It's always been rumored that it was around this time that real-life tensions developed between Lucy Hale and Ashley Benson, so it's possible that this could be a reason behind Aria and Hannah getting less one-on-one scenes together. More likely, though, the writers wanted to explore different dynamics between the girls, and felt that Arya and Hannah's friendship had gotten too much attention early on. As they settled into writing for the different characters and relationships, they may have decided that certain pairings worked better than others, in their eyes. One aspect of Arya and Hannah's friendship that led me to ranking it higher than others is the fact that, from the first season to the last, these two often had the tendency to turn to each other for emotional support before the others. This remains consistent from start to finish, from Arya confiding in Hannah about her struggle with her parents' impending breakup, to Hannah revealing her and Jordan's broken engagement to Arya. As they both knew what it was like to go through their parents' tumultuous relationships and divorces, they were able to relate to each other on a deeper level than the other girls right from the start. Hannah and Spencer. I know a lot of people view Spencer and Hannah as their favorite dynamic between the liars, and I agree that they had a fun and often hilarious relationship that was always entertaining to watch. But at the same time, I've always maintained that their friendship is one that, while fun to see between characters on a TV show, would never work in real life. Between Spencer constantly correcting Hannah, and Hannah often making snarky comments about Spencer's grades or intellect in return.
Before the men came to set up the gazebo and pour the cement. Gazebo.
And you know what, Em, don't go all Spencer on your grades.
Excuse me.
Their regular bickering sometimes made them come across more as frenemies than actual best friends. They certainly had a close and loving friendship, but there are quite a few moments throughout the show that indicate to me that these two didn't have the incredible friendship that many think. I'll never quite be able to get past Hannah's snarky and almost uncaring attitude during both Spencer's breakdown in Season 3 or her struggles with addiction in Season 4.
Are you a speed freak?
For a character who was known to be compassionate and understanding, Hannah's nasty remarks and harsh treatment of Spencer is almost jarringly out of character. Like Emily, I got the feeling that Hannah held Spencer to a higher standard than she did the other members of the group, and took it out on her more harshly when she didn't live up. The primary reason why I can't rank these two higher is because of the love triangle in Season 6. Whether or not Spencer and Caleb should have been together is a subject for a totally different video, but regardless, Hannah openly flirting with Caleb in front of Spencer, making underhanded remarks about them being together,
If you're really not okay with this. Wow, that was fast.
and actively cheating with him definitely puts a strain on their relationship, and makes it hard for me to see their bond as one of the strongest. Despite everything, I have to respect the almost sisterly dynamic between the two, and the support that they offered each other through their darkest moments. When Spencer found out that her parents were divorcing, she went straight to Hannah for support. And when Hannah was devastated over her mother's arrest, it was Spencer who went above and beyond to give her advice and comfort. Despite their casually snarky and even mean moments toward each other, Hannah and Spencer had a casual closeness and chemistry to their interactions that can't be ignored. Arya and Spencer. Perhaps no friendship is more iconic than Arya and Spencer's. Not only was their Sparia nickname used not only by fans, but within the show itself,
Or Team Sparia.
I'm not the only one who could use a little Team Sparia.
but there's a big sister, little sister vibe to their relationship that set them apart from any other pairing. Not only did these two have their fair share of being there for each other and confiding during more emotional times, but there are so many fun and casual moments between them that make them seem like the most normal teen-girl friendship out of the group. Although Hannah and Spencer individually may have been the two liars who were the most headstrong in regards to the A mystery, Spencer and Arya became known for being the investigative duo. Their Team Sparia sleuthing scenes are some of the most iconic on the show, and have brought us some of the most memorable interactions and lines. One point of discourse surrounding Spencer and Arya's friendship has always been the level of reciprocation within it, especially where Arya is concerned. There are definitely moments in which Arya displays a certain amount of selfishness where her friendship with Spencer is concerned, especially during Spencer's breakdown and stay in Radley. But she overall seemed to have the most outward compassion for Spencer's struggles, and genuinely wanted to see her get better. Emily and Hannah. And finally, I have to say that I consider Emily and Hannah to be the closest out of the four girls. The PLL writers certainly didn't pass up the opportunity to take advantage of Shay and Ashley's extremely close off-screen friendship, and that chemistry is extremely evident in their scenes together. What I especially appreciate about their dynamic, and why I have to rank it first, is Emily and Hannah's tendency to be there for each other during the hardest of times. While all of the girls showed each other immeasurable support, these two seemed to go out of their way for each other in a way that was not seen in any other friendship. Between Hannah going above and beyond to make Emily feel comfortable with coming out, Emily immediately deciding to enter the beauty pageant to win money for Hannah's college tuition, and Hannah offering to loan Emily money so she didn't have to sell her eggs in the time jump, there was no length they weren't willing to go to for each other. While fighting can be a sign of love and caring, it's also relevant to point out that Hannah and Emily never seemed to have the big blowout fights that marked some of the other liars' dynamics. They seemed to understand each other in a way that was unique to their bond. I imagine that a lot of this comes down to both of them knowing what it feels like to struggle with their identities. Emily grappled with accepting her sexuality for years before coming out, and Hannah dealt with multiple crises as she worked to learn who she really was as a person. Because of all of this, there was a depth to Hannah and Emily's friendship that really caused them to stand out from the rest. It's impressive that PLL was able to cultivate a group of main characters that all developed such individual, strong friendships with each other. Even the weakest pairings maintained believable and dynamic relationships from start to finish. Of course, all of my opinions on the bonds between the girls are completely up for debate. Which is your favorite friendship and why? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.